My name is Jessica Martinez, and I'm about to tell you the most twisted story of family betrayal you've ever heard. What started as an innocent dinner invitation from my parents became a carefully orchestrated plan to steal my life savings by making me unconscious and using my fingerprint to access my bank accounts while I was passed out on their couch. But here's the part that will blow your mind. I knew it was happening. I recorded everything, and what I did next destroyed my entire family in ways they never saw coming. However, to understand how deep this betrayal goes, you need to understand the 26 years of manipulation and financial abuse that led up to that horrifying night in November 2023. The Martinez family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Alina and Carlos Martinez, lived in a beautiful two-story house in Plano, Texas, complete with a manicured lawn, two-car garage, and the kind of suburban respectability that screamed successful middle-class family. My father worked as a regional manager for a logistics company. My mother was a part-time bookkeeper for a dental office, and together they projected the image of hard-working immigrants who had achieved the American dream. I was the older daughter, 26 years old, working as a software developer for a tech startup in Dallas. My younger sister, Sophia, was 23 and supposedly finishing her degree in finance at the University of Texas. To anyone looking from the outside, we were a close-knit Hispanic family that valued education, hard work, and taking care of each other. But families, especially families like mine, are experts at hiding the truth behind a facade of normalcy. The truth was that I had been my family's personal ATM since I was 14 years old. It started small, the way these things always do. My parents gave both Sophia and me a $5 weekly allowance when we were kids. I saved mine, collecting the bills in an old jewelry box under my bed, dreaming of buying something special. With my accumulated wealth, Sophia spent hers immediately on candy, stickers, whatever caught her eye at the moment. By Wednesday of each week, Sophia would be broke and wanting something she couldn't afford. That's when my parents would step in, with their gentle but relentless manipulation. "Jessica, your sister doesn't have any money left, but you do," my mother would say in that soft, disappointed tone that made me feel like a selfish monster. "Family helps family, don't be greedy." And so I learned, at the tender age of 8, that my value in the Martinez family was directly tied to my willingness to sacrifice my own wants for Sophia's immediate gratification. I learned that saying no to family requests wasn't just selfishness, it was a betrayal of everything we were supposed to stand for as a tight-knit Hispanic family. The pattern escalated as we got older. In high school, I got a part-time job at a local electronics store, working weekends and some weekday evenings to earn my own spending money. I was proud of that job, proud of the independence it represented, proud of the fact that I could buy my own clothes and school supplies without having to ask my parents for every dollar. Sophia, meanwhile, focused on her social life and her studies. She didn't work because, according to my parents, she was more focused on her education and would have plenty of time to work when she was older. But whenever Sophia wanted something beyond what my parents could afford — concert tickets, designer, jeans, money for school trips — guess who got the gentle pressure to share her hard-earned wages? "Sophia really wants to go to homecoming, but the dress she likes is a little expensive," my mother would say, not quite making eye contact. "You've been saving up your paychecks. Maybe you could help your sister. She'd do the same for you." Except Sophia never had any money to share, because Sophia never worked, because Sophia was never expected to contribute anything except charm and good grades. I told myself it was temporary. Once Sophia got older, once she started working, once she learned the value of money, the dynamic would change. We'd become equals instead of me being the family's designated provider. I was wrong. When I left for college at 18, I thought I'd finally escape the cycle. I was 2 states away, busy with classes and internships, living on student loans and the small income from my work-study job. For 2 blissful years, I was broke enough that no one could expect me to subsidize anyone else's lifestyle. But then I graduated with a computer science degree and landed my first real job as a junior developer. The salary wasn't huge — $45,000 a year, which felt like a fortune to someone who'd been living on ramen and determination for 4 years, but was actually pretty modest for someone trying to pay off student loans and rent an apartment in the Dallas area. To my family, however, my entry-level tech job represented unlimited wealth and endless opportunity for them to benefit from my success. The requests started immediately. Sophia's textbooks are so expensive this semester. My mother called to tell me during my second week on the job, could you help her out just this once? She's working so hard in school, and we don't want her to have to get a job and distract from her studies. Just this once, the phrase that would haunt me for the next 6 years. I sent Sophia $300 for textbooks. She used it to buy textbooks and also a new laptop bag, some decorative lights for her dorm room, and dinner out with friends for the rest of the week. When I pointed out that textbooks shouldn't cost $300, Sophia got defensive. I needed other school supplies too, she said. You don't know how expensive everything is here. Besides, you're making good money now. $300 isn't that much to you. That attitude that my money was somehow less valuable because I earned more of it became the foundation of every financial interaction I had with my family for the next several years. When Sophia's car broke down, I was expected to help with the repair bill. When my parents' air conditioning died in the middle of a Texas summer, I was expected to contribute to the replacement cost. When Sophia wanted to study abroad for a semester, I was expected to help fund her European adventure. You don't understand the opportunities she's getting, my father explained when I hesitated about the study abroad contribution. This could change her whole career trajectory. We're investing in her future. As if I was an equal partner in their parenting decisions instead of a daughter who was being manipulated into funding her sister's lifestyle. But the worst part wasn't the money itself. The worst part was how my family had learned to weaponize guilt and cultural expectations to make me feel like a bad person for wanting to keep the money I earned. In our culture, family comes first. My mother would remind me whenever I showed reluctance to hand over my paycheck. That's what makes us different from Americans who abandon their families the minute they turned 18. Your sister looks up to you, my father would add. Don't you want to be the kind of big sister who helps her succeed? And my personal favorite, when you're older and need help, don't you want to know that your family will be there for you? The implied threat was always the same. Be generous now, or be cut off later. Pay for Sophia's wants today, or lose your family tomorrow. So I paid. For 6 years, I paid for everything they asked me to pay for, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself it was cultural, telling myself it was love. I was lying to myself about all three things. The breaking point came in October 2023, 2 weeks before the dinner that would change everything forever. Sophia called me at work, which was unusual. She typically communicated through carefully crafted text messages that made her requests sound casual and urgent at the same time. But this time, her voice was shaking. Jessica, I need help, she said without preamble. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. What kind of trouble? I can't talk about it over the phone. Can you come home this weekend? I need to explain everything in person. Something in her tone sent ice water through my veins. This wasn't her usual I need money for something fun request. This was panic. Sophia, you're scaring me. What's going on? I made some mistakes. Financial mistakes. I made some really bad investment decisions with money I didn't have. And now I owe people, and if I don't pay them back soon, I could lose everything. My degree, my future, everything. How much money are we talking about? Silence. Sophia, how much? $12,000. I sat down hard in my desk chair. $12,000 was more money than I'd given my family combined over the previous 6 years. It was more than I had in my savings account. It was more than I could afford to lose. What did you do? I asked. I can't explain over the phone, she repeated. Please, Jessica. I know it's a lot, but you're the only person who can help me. I promise I'll pay you back. I'll get a job. I'll work extra hours, whatever it takes. That weekend, I drove to Plano to hear Sophia's explanation. What she told me destroyed any illusion I'd been harboring about my family's character. Sophia had been making risky cryptocurrency investments and day trading with money she didn't have. It had started small with a few $100s from her student loans, but she'd gotten overconfident after some early wins and had started borrowing money to invest larger amounts. She'd been using her student loans to fund her trading, telling my parents she needed extra money for school expenses while actually putting it into volatile investments. When the student loan money ran out, she'd started using credit cards. When she maxed out her credit cards, she'd borrowed money from friends. When her friends stopped lending to her, she'd started borrowing from loan services with terrible interest rates. I know I can make it back, she said, tears streaming down her face as we sat in her car outside our parents' house. I've been so close so many times. I just need enough money to make one big trade and win back what I lost. That's when I knew that $12,000 wouldn't be enough. Even if I gave her everything she was asking for, she'd lose it in bad trades and be back asking for more within a month. I can't give you $12,000 to throw away on risky investments, I said. I'm not going to throw it away, she insisted. I'm going to pay back the people I owe and then stop completely. I swear, Sophia, you're addicted to the rush of trading. You need help, not more money. I'm not addicted, she snapped. I just got in over my head. This isn't about addiction. It's about family. I'm your sister. You're supposed to help me. There it was again, the manipulation disguised as love, the guilt dressed up as cultural obligation. No, I said. I'm not giving you $12,000 to throw away on bad investments. I'll help you find a financial counselor. I'll help you talk to mom and dad, but I'm not funding your trading addiction. Sophia's tears stopped immediately. Her expression shifted from desperate to cold in a way that should have warned me about what was coming. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. When I lose everything, when my life is ruined, when I have to drop out of school and our parents find out why, you're going to remember that you could have prevented it and chose not to. Sophia, get out of my car, she said. If you're not going to help me, then we have nothing to talk about. I got out. Sophia drove away without looking back. For 3 weeks, my family didn't speak to me. No texts, no calls, no forwarded memes or family photos. Complete radio silence that felt like punishment for my refusal to enable Sophia's financial self-destruction. I told myself I'd made the right choice. I told myself that giving Sophia money would only make her problems worse. I told myself that real love sometimes means saying no. But I also missed my family. Despite everything, despite the years of manipulation and financial exploitation, I loved them. I wanted to believe they were capable of change, capable of seeing me as more than just a source of money. So when my mother called me on November 15th and invited me to dinner, I said yes. We miss you, Mia, she said, her voice warm and motherly, in a way I hadn't heard in months. Your father and I have been talking, and we think we've been too hard on you about Sophia's situation. We want to apologize and start fresh. An apology from my parents, for the first time in my adult life. We're making your favorite, my mother continued. Chicken enchiladas, Spanish rice, that cranberry juice you used to love, just family dinner. No pressure, no drama. What do you say? I should have been suspicious. I should have questioned why they were suddenly ready to apologize after weeks of silent treatment. I should have wondered what had changed. Instead, I heard what I wanted, to hear that my family was ready to treat me like a daughter instead of a bank account. I'll be there Sunday at 6, I said. But what I didn't know was that my family had spent those 3 weeks of silence planning something that would make all their previous manipulations look like child's play. They weren't inviting me to dinner to apologize. They were inviting me to dinner to rob me, and the person who warned me about what was really happening was someone I never expected. Sophia's boyfriend Mark, who had discovered their plan and couldn't live with the knowledge of what they were about to do. His text message would save me from losing everything I'd worked for, but it would also force me to make a choice that would destroy my family forever. The dinner was set for November 19th, 2023. The plan they had in mind would have left me financially ruined and completely helpless. But instead, it became the night I finally fought back. And what I recorded that night would send shockwaves through our entire extended family and change everything forever. You won't believe what lengths they went to in order to steal from their own daughter, but you also won't believe what I did to stop them. Sunday, November 19th, 2023. The day that would change everything. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine as a peace offering, and wearing the blue dress my mother had always said looked good on me. I wanted this dinner to go well. I wanted to believe that my family was ready to see me as more than just a source of emergency funding. The house looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks earlier when I'd stormed out after refusing to give Sophia $12,000 for her trading debts. Same perfectly manicured lawn, same decorative wreath on the front door, same sense of suburban respectability that had always masked the dysfunction happening inside. But something felt different the moment my mother opened the door. Jessica, Mia, you look beautiful, she said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a beat too long. Come in, we're so excited to have you here. Her enthusiasm felt forced, like she was trying too hard to project normalcy. But I pushed down my instincts because I wanted this reconciliation to be real. My father was sitting in his usual spot in the living room, watching a football game with the volume turned low. He stood up when I entered, and for a moment, we both hesitated. We'd never been a huggy family, but after 3 weeks of silence, normal protocol felt inadequate. "Dad," I said, settling for a polite nod. "Jessica," he replied, returning the nod. "Good to see you." Sophia was already at the dining room table, scrolling through her phone with that practiced indifference she'd perfected as a teenager. She glanced up when I walked in, offered a small smile that didn't reach her eyes, then returned to her screen. "Sophia," I said, taking my usual seat across from her. "Hey," she replied without looking up. "Thanks for coming." The table was set, with my mother's good china, the kind she only used for special occasions, or when she was trying to make a point about how important family gatherings were supposed to be. My place setting included a glass filled with cranberry juice, which had been my favorite drink when I was younger. I hadn't had cranberry juice in months, maybe years, but seeing it there felt like a small gesture of remembrance, like my mother was trying to recapture happier times when family dinners were about love instead of money. "You still like cranberry juice, right, Mia?" my mother asked as she bustled around the kitchen, bringing out serving dishes filled with my childhood favorites: chicken enchiladas, Spanish rice, refried beans, fresh tortillas. "I do," I said, though I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually drunk any. "This all looks amazing, Mom. Thank you for making my favorites." "Of course," she said, settling into her own chair with a smile that seemed more genuine than her earlier forced enthusiasm. Family dinner should be special. For the first 15 minutes, everything felt surprisingly normal. We talked about safe topics: my father's work, my mother's part-time bookkeeping clients, Sophia's upcoming final exams. The conversation flowed easier than it had in months, and I started to relax. Maybe this really was just a family dinner. Maybe my parents had decided that maintaining a relationship with me was more important than getting money from me. Maybe Sophia had learned her lesson about risky financial decisions and was ready to take responsibility for her own life. I was wrong about all of it. The first sign that something was off came when my father started telling a long, rambling story about construction delays affecting his company's delivery routes. It was the kind of mundane work anecdote that usually lasted 2 minutes. But he kept going, adding unnecessary details, circling back to points he'd already made. I was only half listening when my phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down discreetly, expecting to see a text from a coworker, or maybe a notification from one of my apps. Instead, I saw a message from an unknown number. "Get up and leave now. Don't say anything to your parents." I stared at the screen, reading the message again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The text was stark, urgent, with no emojis or casual punctuation. Just a clear instruction delivered like a command. My first thought was that it was some kind of scam or wrong number, but something about the timing, receiving an anonymous warning while sitting at my family's dinner table, sent ice water through my veins. I looked around the table. My father was still talking about delivery trucks. My mother was nodding along, occasionally making supportive noises. Sophia was picking at her enchiladas, seemingly absorbed in her food. Everything looked normal, but the text message felt like a fire alarm going off in my head. "I'll be right back," I said, standing up from the table. "Just need to use the bathroom." No one questioned it. No one even looked particularly interested in my departure. I walked upstairs to the guest bathroom, the one with the door that actually locked properly, and called the number that had texted me. It rang once before someone picked up. "You're still there." The voice was male, young, and tight with anxiety. "Who is this?" I whispered. "It's Mark, Sophia's boyfriend." Mark. I'd met him a few times over the past year, but Sophia's relationships tended to be temporary, so I'd never gotten to know him well. He seemed nice enough, quiet, studying computer science at a community college, working part-time at a phone repair shop. "Mark, what the hell is going on? You need to leave," he said urgently. "Right now. Just get up, walk out. Don't drink anything else." "What are you talking about? Why would I don't drink the juice?" he interrupted. "Whatever you do, don't drink the cranberry juice." My mouth went dry. I hadn't touched the juice yet, but it was sitting downstairs on the table, waiting for me to return. "Why?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "I can't explain everything over the phone," Mark said. but they put something in it. Something to make you sleep. And while you're unconscious, they're planning to use your fingerprint to access your bank accounts. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, too hot. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, trying to process what Mark was telling me. That's insane, I said. My parents wouldn't. They would, Mark said firmly. I heard them planning it. All three of them. They've been working on this for weeks. But why are you telling me? Sophia's your girlfriend. There was a pause before Mark answered. Because I can't be with someone who would do this to their own sister. And because you don't deserve what they're planning to do to you. I sat in that bathroom for several minutes after Mark hung up, staring at my phone and trying to decide what to believe. On one hand, the idea that my parents and sister would put something in my drink to knock me unconscious, so they could steal my money seemed like something out of a crime drama, not real life. On the other hand, I'd been dealing with their financial manipulation for years. I knew they saw me as a source of money rather than a daughter and sister, and Sophia was desperate enough about her trading debts that she might be willing to do anything to get the money she needed, but stealing from me while I was unconscious, using my own fingerprint to access my accounts without my knowledge, that crossed a line from manipulation into actual crime. I had to know for sure. When I returned to the dinner table, I decided to test Mark's warning. I picked up the glass of cranberry juice, tilted it slightly, and took a small sip. It tasted exactly like I remembered, sweet, slightly tart, familiar, but was there something else? A slight bitterness underneath the fruit flavor, or was I imagining things because Mark had planted the idea in my head? Everything okay, Mia? My mother asked. You were gone for a while. Yeah, just had to take a work call. I lied. Sorry about that. I set the glass back down without taking another sip. For the next 20 minutes, I watched my family more carefully than I'd ever watched anyone in my life, looking for signs, for tells, for any indication that they were putting on a performance instead of having a genuine family dinner. And once I started looking, the signs were everywhere. My father kept glancing at my glass, checking to see how much I'd drunk. When he noticed I hadn't touched it after that initial sip, he started encouraging me to drink more. You're not touching your juice, he said. Your mother went to the store specifically to get cranberry juice for you. I'm just pacing myself, I said. Don't want to fill up on liquids before I finish eating. My mother joined in. It's the good kind, too. Not from concentrate. I know how much you used to love it. Even Sophia, who had barely spoken during dinner, suddenly became interested in my beverage consumption. Are you on some kind of diet? She asked. You're not drinking anything? The pressure was subtle but persistent, and the more they pushed, the more convinced I became that Mark had been telling the truth. They had put something in my cranberry juice, but I needed to know what they were planning to do once whatever they'd put in there took effect. So I decided to do something that, looking back, was either brilliant or incredibly dangerous. I decided to fake it. The next time someone looked away from the table, I tilted my glass under the table and let most of the cranberry juice pour out onto the carpet. Not all of it, that would have been too obvious, but enough to make it look like I'd been drinking. Then I waited. After about 10 more minutes of forcing myself to eat and make small talk, I started my performance. I'm feeling kind of weird, I said, putting my hand to my forehead. Dizzy, I think. All three of them immediately became more attentive. Are you okay? My mother asked, her voice full of concern that might have been genuine or might have been anticipation. Yeah, just, tired all of a sudden. Really tired. Maybe you should lie down for a few minutes, my father suggested. The couch is comfortable. They helped me to the living room couch like I was precious cargo, like they were caring family members concerned about my well-being instead of criminals waiting for their scheme to take effect. I lay down on the couch, closed my eyes, and tried to breathe steadily while my heart pounded with adrenaline and terror. Is she asleep? I heard my mother whisper after a few minutes. I think so, Sophia replied quietly. She's not moving. Let's give it a few more minutes, my father said. We need to make sure she's completely out. Completely out. The words sent chills down my spine. I forced myself to lie still, to breathe evenly, to play the part of someone who had been rendered unconscious against their will. Meanwhile, my mind was racing, trying to process the fact that my own family, people who claimed to love me, had just confirmed that they'd put something in my drink. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 minutes, I heard my father's voice again. Okay, let's do this quickly. I felt someone gently lift my hand. Then my thumb was pressed against something my phone screen. I realized the fingerprint sensor. A soft vibration indicated that my phone had unlocked. "We're in," Sophia whispered. "Which app should we try first?" "Start with her main bank account," my father said quietly. "The one she uses for direct deposit." More tapping on my phone screen. The sound of someone navigating through my banking app. "How much should we transfer?" my mother asked. "Not everything," my father replied. "Just enough to cover Sophia's debt and maybe a little extra. If we take too much, she'll notice immediately." 15,000, Sophia suggested. "That should work. Transfer it to the account we set up." My heart was beating so hard I was afraid they would hear it. My own family was stealing from me while I lay unconscious on their couch. Using my own fingerprint to authorize transactions I would never have agreed to. But then something unexpected happened. "It's asking for additional verification," Sophia said, frustration creeping into her voice. "What do you mean, two-factor authentication?" "It wants a code from her phone or email." "Check her messages," my father said. "I am. There's no verification code coming through." "Try a different app," my mother suggested. "Maybe her savings account." More tapping. Same result. "Everything's locked down," Sophia said, sounding increasingly agitated. She must have changed her security settings. They had no idea that I'd anticipated exactly this scenario. After years of working in tech, I knew how to protect my accounts from unauthorized access. I'd set up multi-factor authentication on every single financial app, requiring verification codes that would be sent to a separate device they couldn't access. "Just put the phone back," my father said finally. "We'll figure out another way." Another way. They weren't giving up. This wasn't their only plan. I waited several more minutes, giving them time to settle back into their chairs and convince themselves that I was still unconscious. Then I slowly opened my eyes and sat up, blinking like someone waking from a deep sleep. "Sorry," I said, stretching and yawning. "I don't know what came over me. I just felt so tired all of a sudden." "Are you feeling better now?" my mother asked, and I couldn't tell if her concern was real or if she was just disappointed that their plan had failed. "Yeah, I think so. But I should probably head home. I've got an early meeting tomorrow." "Of course," my father said. "Thanks for coming to dinner. It was good to see you." They walked me to the door like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just attempted to commit identity theft and bank fraud against their own daughter. At the door. We exchanged hugs, the kind of automatic, obligatory family hugs that had been part of our routine for years. But this time, everything felt different. This time, I knew I was hugging people who had just tried to rob me. "Drive safe," my mother said. "I will," replied. "Thanks for dinner." I walked to my car, got in, and drove away from my parents' house for what I now knew would be the last time. But I wasn't going home. I was going to the police station. Because while my family thought they had failed in their attempt to steal from me, they had actually succeeded in something much more damaging to themselves. They had given me everything I needed to destroy them. See, there was something my family didn't know about me, something that came from years of working in software development and dealing with security protocols. I had recorded everything before I'd even arrived at dinner. I'd set up a voice recording app on my phone, the kind that runs in the background, without any visible indicators. It had been recording from the moment I walked into their house until the moment I left. Every word they'd spoken while they thought I was unconscious, every detail of their plan, every admission of guilt. I had audio evidence of my parents and sister conspiring to commit multiple felonies against me, and I was about to use that evidence to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. The drive to the Plano Police Department took 12 minutes. I spent those 12 minutes listening to the recording I'd made, hearing my family's voices as they planned to steal from me, hearing their casual discussion of criminal activity like it was just another family project at the police station. I walked up to the front desk and told the officer on duty that I needed to report a crime. "What kind of crime?" she asked. "My family put something in my drink to make me unconscious, then tried to use my fingerprint to steal money from my bank accounts," I said. "I have a recording of them doing it." The officer's expression shifted from routine boredom to shock. "Attention, ma'am, are you saying your family attempted to drug and rob you?" "Yes," I said, "and I have proof." What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy my family's reputation, their financial stability, and their freedom. but it would also force me to confront a terrible truth about the people I'd spent 26 years loving and supporting. Some betrayals are so complete, so calculated, so evil that forgiveness becomes impossible, and some families are so toxic that the only way to save yourself is to burn the whole thing down. The police investigation that followed would uncover secrets about my family that went far beyond what had happened at that dinner table, because what I didn't know was that I wasn't their first victim. They'd been doing this to other people for months, and what the police found when they searched my parents' house would shock even me. Walking into the Plano Police Department at 9:47 p.m. on a Sunday night felt surreal. The lobby was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of police radio chatter. I approached the front desk, where Officer Maria Santos was reviewing paperwork with the kind of methodical attention that suggested she'd been dealing with mundane administrative tasks all evening. "I need to report a crime," I said. Officer Santos looked up from her paperwork, her expression shifting from routine boredom to professional alertness. "In my experience, people don't usually walk into police stations on Sunday nights unless something serious has happened." "What kind of crime?" she asked, reaching for a pen. "An incident report form. My family put something in my drink to make me unconscious, then attempted to use my fingerprint to access my bank accounts without my permission," I said, the words feeling strange and unreal even as I spoke them. Officer Santos stopped writing and looked at me more carefully. "Ma'am, are you saying that members of your family attempted to drug and rob you?" "Yes," I said, "and I have audio recordings of them planning and executing the crime." That's when everything changed. Within minutes, I was sitting in a small interview room with Detective James Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran of the Plano Police Department who specialized in financial crimes and family violence cases. He was in his 40s, with graying hair and the kind of calm, professional demeanor that probably helped victims feel safe enough to tell their stories. "Ms. Martinez," Detective Rodriguez said, setting up a digital recorder on the table between us, "I want you to start from the beginning and tell me exactly what happened tonight." For the next hour, I walked Detective Rodriguez through everything. The years of financial manipulation, Sophia's trading debts, the 3 weeks of silence after I refused to give her $12,000, the dinner invitation that had seemed like an olive branch, Mark's warning text, the discovery that my cranberry juice had been tampered with, the audio recording I'd made of my family attempting to steal from me while they thought I was unconscious. Detective Rodriguez listened without interrupting, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished my story, he asked to hear the recording. I played the audio file on my phone, watching Detective Rodriguez's expression grow darker as he heard my family's voices, discussing their plan to use my fingerprint to access my accounts. "Is she asleep?" My mother's whispered voice filled the small interview room. "I think so. She's not moving." Sophia's response, casual and "Let's give it a few more minutes. We need to make sure she's completely out." My father, coordinating their criminal activity like it was a family project. When the recording ended, Detective Rodriguez sat back in his chair and shook his head. "Ms. Martinez, what you've captured here is evidence of conspiracy to commit identity theft, attempted bank fraud, and administering a substance without consent. These are serious felonies." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here. I have to ask, are you absolutely certain you want to pursue criminal charges against your parents and sister? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your family members will be arrested, prosecuted, and if convicted, they'll have permanent criminal records." I thought about that question for a long moment. Part of me, the part that had been trained from childhood to prioritize family loyalty above everything else, wanted to find some way to resolve this without destroying my parents' and sisters' lives. But the larger part of me, the part that had finally understood the full scope of their betrayal, knew that what they'd done couldn't be forgiven or forgotten. "They drugged me," I said. "They planned to steal thousands of dollars from me while I was unconscious. If I hadn't been warned, if I hadn't protected my accounts, they would have succeeded. Yes, I want to press charges." Detective Rodriguez nodded. "Okay, we'll need to collect some evidence. First, I want to have you examined by a medical professional to see if we can detect any foreign substances in your system. Then we'll need to get a warrant to search your family's house and electronic devices." "What are you looking for?" "Evidence of premeditation." text messages, emails, internet searches about the substances they used, purchase records for whatever they put in your drink, and. He paused, studying his notes. Ms. Martinez, based on the sophistication of what your family attempted tonight, I have a feeling this isn't their first time doing something like this. What do you mean? The level of planning involved, the casual way they discussed the crime, the fact that they had a bank account set up specifically to receive stolen funds. This suggests experience. People don't usually start with identity theft and bank fraud. They work up to it. A chill ran down my spine. You think they've done this to other people? I think we need to investigate that possibility, Detective Rodriguez said. With your permission, I'd like to expand this investigation beyond just what happened to you tonight. At 11:30 p.m., I was at Plano General Hospital, giving blood and urine samples that would be tested for the presence of sleep aids or other substances. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Patricia Kim, explained that depending on what my family had used and how much time had passed, they might or might not be able to detect it in my system. The good news is that you recognized something was wrong and didn't consume the full amount, Dr. Kim said as she labeled my blood sample. If they used something like diphenhydramine, basically a strong antihistamine that causes drowsiness, it would have shown up in higher concentrations if you'd drunk the entire glass. Diphenhydramine, it's the active ingredient in many over-the-counter sleep aids, perfectly legal to purchase, but illegal to give to someone without their knowledge. In high doses, it can cause unconsciousness, memory loss, and in extreme cases, respiratory depression. The idea that my family had researched and planned to use medication to render me unconscious was somehow more disturbing than if they'd used something obviously illegal. It suggested premeditation, research, careful consideration of their options. While I was at the hospital, Detective Rodriguez and his team were obtaining search warrants for my parents' house and all 3 family members' electronic devices. The process moved faster than I'd expected, partly because the audio recording provided clear evidence of criminal activity, and partly because Detective Rodriguez had connected my case to an ongoing investigation into similar crimes in the Worth area. We've had reports over the past 6 months of family members being victimized by relatives who gained access to their accounts using biometric data, Detective Rodriguez explained when I returned to the police station around 1 a.m. Most victims were too embarrassed to press charges, or they were convinced by their families not to involve law enforcement. But the pattern was there. You think my family is connected to those other cases? We're about to find out. At 6 a.m. on Monday morning, Plano police executed search warrants at my parents' house and Sophia's apartment. I wasn't present for the searches. Detective Rodriguez thought it would be better for me to stay away while evidence was being collected. But he called me that afternoon with updates that made my blood run cold. Ms. Martinez, we found some things at your family's residence that I need to discuss with you, Detective Rodriguez said. Can you come in this afternoon? When I arrived at the police station, Detective Rodriguez led me to a conference room, where evidence bags and printed documents were spread across a large table. We found a notebook in your father's desk that appears to be a planning document for various financial crimes, Detective Rodriguez said, pointing to a composition book with my father's handwriting. It includes detailed information about at least 12 different potential victims, including you. I leaned forward to look at the notebook. My father's neat handwriting filled page after page with what looked like target profiles, names, ages, estimated income levels, relationship to the family, assessment of their financial security, and emotional vulnerabilities. My own name was on page 7, with notes that made me feel sick to read. Jessica, software developer, approximately $75K annual income, minimal family contact but responds to guilt about cultural obligations, savings estimated at $20 to $5K based on lifestyle, lives alone, no spouse to complicate access. History of financial support for family suggests willingness to sacrifice for others. Weakness, desperate need for family approval. There are 11 other names in this book, Detective Rodriguez continued. Extended family members, family friends, people your parents met through work or church. We've started contacting these individuals to see if any of them have experienced suspicious financial activity. Have you found any other victims? Detective Rodriguez's expression was grim. So far, we've confirmed 4 additional victims. All of them reported strange incidents over the past year, being invited to family gatherings where they felt unusually tired afterward, discovering unauthorized access attempts to their accounts, finding that cash or valuables had gone missing from their homes during family visits. I sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. My family hadn't just targeted me, they'd been running a systematic criminal operation, using family relationships and cultural expectations to manipulate and rob people who trusted them. There's more, Detective Rodriguez said. We found evidence that your sister Sophia's financial problems are much worse than you realized. She owes approximately $47,000 to various creditors, not the $12,000 she told you about. 40,000, credit cards, personal loans, money borrowed from classmates and coworkers. She's been funding an extremely expensive lifestyle while maintaining the pretense of being a struggling college student. The trading losses you mentioned were just the tip of the iceberg. Detective Rodriguez showed me printouts of Sophia's bank statements and credit card bills, designer clothing purchases, expensive restaurant charges, luxury hotel stays, spa treatments. Sophia had been living like someone with a six-figure income while supposedly being supported by our parents. But where was she getting all this money? That's where it gets interesting, Detective Rodriguez said. We found evidence that your family has been running this scheme for at least 2 years. They would target relatives and family friends, gain access to their accounts through various methods, and steal small amounts, usually under $1,000 at a time. Small enough that victims might not notice immediately, or might assume they'd made the purchases themselves, and they used that money to fund Sophia's lifestyle. Partly, but we also found evidence that they were planning something much bigger. Your father's notebook includes plans for what he called the Big Score, a scheme to steal large amounts from multiple victims simultaneously, then disappear to Mexico before anyone could trace the crimes back to them. I felt like I was going to be sick. My family hadn't just been manipulating me for years, they'd been operating a criminal enterprise that victimized dozens of people who trusted them. The dinner invitation to you wasn't about reconciliation, Detective Rodriguez continued. Based on your father's notes, it was supposed to be a test run for their larger plan. If they could successfully steal from you, someone who was already suspicious of their motives, then they felt confident they could target the other victims on their list. Other victims. Detective Rodriguez showed me another page from my father's notebook, a list of upcoming family events, holiday gatherings, and social occasions where they plan to systematically target and rob relatives and family friends. Your cousin Maria's wedding in December, your aunt's 60th birthday party in January, your family's New Year's Eve party. Each event was an opportunity to drug and rob multiple victims in a single night. The scope of their plan was breathtaking in its cruelty. They'd been using family love and cultural traditions as cover for crimes that would have destroyed the financial security of dozens of people who trusted them. But there's something else you need to know, Detective Rodriguez said. We found evidence that this wasn't entirely your parents' idea. He showed me text message printouts from Sophia's phone, messages between Sophia and someone named Alex that detailed plans for targeting family members, discussing the best methods for gaining access to bank accounts, and celebrating successful thefts. Sophia was the mastermind, Detective Rodriguez said. She recruited your parents into helping her fund her lifestyle by stealing from relatives. Your father's notebook shows that this whole operation started when Sophia convinced them that the family owed her financial support and that taking money from relatives without permission was just redistributing family wealth. I read through Sophia's text messages, seeing my sister's true personality revealed in her own words. She referred to family members as marks and easy targets. She bragged about manipulating our parents into believing that stealing from relatives was justifiable. She expressed excitement about the money they would steal and contempt for the victims who trusted them. Your parents were definitely willing participants, Detective Rodriguez clarified, but Sophia was the driving force. She identified targets, researched methods, and coordinated the crimes. The final piece of evidence Detective Rodriguez showed me was the most damaging of all. Video recordings from Sophia's phone that documented several successful thefts Sophia had recorded. Herself going through an unconscious relative's purse at a family barbecue, stealing cash and credit cards. She'd filmed herself using an elderly aunt's fingerprint to unlock her phone and transfer money while the woman slept during a family movie night. She'd documented herself and our parents systematically, robbing a family friend who had trusted them enough to let them house it while she was on vacation. She was keeping these as trophies, Detective Rodriguez said, or possibly as insurance, in case your parents ever tried to back out of the operation. Watching those videos was the final destruction of any sympathy I might have felt for my family. They weren't desperate people who had made one terrible mistake. They were predators who had deliberately chosen to victimize people who loved and trusted them. What happens next? I asked. Tomorrow morning, we'll be arresting your parents and sister on multiple felony charges: identity theft, bank fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse. The charges will depend on the specific crimes we can prove against each victim. Based on the evidence we've collected, they're all looking at significant prison time. How significant? Your sister could face up to 20 years if convicted on all charges. Your parents are looking at 10 to 15 years each. And that's assuming they don't have any prior criminal history that we don't know about yet. I left the police station that evening feeling like my entire understanding of reality had been shattered. The family I'd grown up with, the people I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for, were strangers. Criminal strangers who had seen me as nothing more than an opportunity for financial gain. But what haunted me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that if Mark hadn't warned me, if I hadn't been technologically savvy enough to protect my accounts, if I hadn't been suspicious enough to record everything, their plan would have worked. I would have woken up the next morning with no memory of what had happened and no idea that thousands of dollars had been stolen from my accounts. I might have assumed I'd had some kind of blackout episode or medical emergency. I might have been grateful to my family for taking care of me during what seemed like a health crisis, and they would have used my gratitude as cover to steal from me again and again, while simultaneously targeting other relatives and family friends. In an expanding web of financial crimes, that night, I sat in my apartment and tried to process everything I'd learned. My family was going to prison. My extended family was going to discover that people they'd trusted had been systematically stealing from them. The Martinez family name was going to become synonymous with betrayal and financial crime. And it was all because I'd finally said no. If I'd given Sophia the $12,000 she'd asked for in October, if I'd continued being the family ATM, would they have called off their criminal operation? Or would they have just seen my continued compliance as proof that they could get away with anything? I was about to find out just how far their sense of entitlement extended, because when the arrests happened the next morning, my family's reaction would reveal that even facing serious prison time, they still believed that I was the villain in this story. And their attempts to manipulate me from jail would be so outrageous that even I, someone who had been conditioned to accept their abuse for 26 years, would be shocked by their audacity. The phone call started 3 hours after their arrest. And what they said during those calls would convince me that I'd made the right choice in destroying them completely. Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. 6:47 a.m. I was making coffee in my kitchen when my phone rang with a call from Detective Rodriguez. "Ms. Martinez, we've made the arrests," he said without preamble. "Your parents were taken into custody at their home. About 20 minutes ago, Sophia was arrested at her apartment. All three are being processed at the Plano City Jail." I sat down at my kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, trying to process the fact that my parents and sister were now in jail cells because of evidence I'd provided. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt sick. "What happens now?" I asked. "They'll be arraigned later today. Given the serious nature of the charges and the evidence we've collected, I expect all three will be held pending trial. Their bail hearings will probably be scheduled for later this week." "Are they allowed to make phone calls?" "Yes, they each get phone calls from jail. Ms. Martinez, I want to prepare you for the possibility that they'll try to contact you. Defendants often try to pressure victims to drop charges or change their testimony. If they call you, I strongly recommend that you don't answer." I thanked Detective Rodriguez and hung up, then sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my phone and waiting for it to ring. I didn't have to wait long. The first call came at 9:23 a.m. My mother's name appeared on my caller ID, but when I answered, an automated voice informed me that this was a call from an inmate at the Collin County Jail and asked if I would accept the charges. I almost hung up. Detective Rodriguez had warned me not to take these calls, and I knew that anything my family said would probably be manipulation, designed to make me feel guilty for turning them in. But I also knew that this might be my only chance to hear what they really thought about what they'd done, now that they were facing the consequences of their actions. I accepted the call. "Jessica." My mother's voice was shaky, desperate. "Mia, Thank God you answered. Mom, Jessica, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The police arrested us this morning, and they're saying we tried to steal from you, but that's not what happened at all. Even from jail, even facing felony charges, even with audio recordings of their crimes, my mother was still trying to manipulate me. Mom, I recorded everything. I have audio of you, Dad, and Sophia planning to use my fingerprint to steal from my bank accounts while I was unconscious. That wasn't real, my mother said quickly. We were just pretending. Testing to see if your phone security was working properly. We were trying to protect you from hackers. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to convince me that their attempted theft had actually been some kind of security test conducted for my benefit. You put something in my cranberry juice to make me unconscious. No, Mia, that's not what happened. You just got tired from working so hard. You've been under so much stress lately. We were worried about you. The police found the notebook, Mom, Dad's notebook, with details about 12 different victims. They found evidence that you've been stealing from family members for 2 years. There was a pause. Then my mother's voice changed, becoming harder, more desperate. Jessica, you don't understand what you've done. You've destroyed our family. Your father could lose his job. Sophia could lose her scholarship. Do you really want to be responsible for ruining all our lives over a misunderstanding? It's not a misunderstanding when you drug someone and try to steal their money. We weren't going to steal anything, my mother insisted. We were just going to borrow a little bit to help Sophia with her debt. We would have paid you back, without asking my permission, while I was unconscious. Using my fingerprint to access accounts you had no right to touch. You're being dramatic, my mother said, and I could hear the frustration creeping into her voice. This is what you always do. You blow everything out of proportion. We're your family. Family helps each other. Family doesn't drug each other. We didn't drug you, my mother snapped. You're making that up to get attention. You've always been jealous of Sophia, and now you're using this situation to punish her for being more successful than you. The call was recorded, of course. All calls from jail are recorded and can be used as evidence in court. My mother was creating additional evidence of her guilt while she tried to manipulate me into dropping charges. Mom, I'm not dropping the charges. Jessica, please, I'm begging you. Your father and I are old. We can't survive in prison. And Sophia, she's just a young girl who made some mistakes. Don't destroy your sister's life over money. This isn't about money. This is about the fact that you violated my trust in the worst possible way. We're your parents, my mother said, her voice breaking. We gave you life. We raised you. We loved you. Doesn't that mean anything? It used to, I said. But you threw all of that away when you decided to see me as a source of money instead of a daughter. I hung up. The second call came 2 hours later. This time it was my father. Jessica, your mother called me crying, he said without any greeting. She says you're refusing to help us fix this misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Dad. You planned to steal from me. Listen to me very carefully, my father said, and his voice had none of my mother's emotional desperation. It was cold, calculated, threatening. You think you're being smart by going to the police, but you don't understand the consequences of what you've started. What do you mean? I mean that if you don't drop these charges immediately, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. We know things about you, Jessica. Things that could get you in serious trouble if they came to light. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? Remember when you were in college and you used our credit cards for spring break? Remember when you borrowed money from our joint checking account to pay for your car repairs? We never reported those incidents to the police, but we have documentation, receipts, bank records, security camera footage. ***, he was threatening to frame me for crimes I'd never committed. The spring break trip he was referencing had been a family vacation that he'd insisted I put on his credit card because it would earn rewards points. The car repair money had been a loan that I'd paid back within 2 weeks, with his full knowledge and consent. But he was betting that his word, and whatever fake documentation he could create, would be enough to make me look like a hypocrite for pressing charges against them. Those weren't crimes, Dad. You gave me permission for all of those things. That's not how the police will see it when we give them the evidence, my father said. Bank fraud is bank fraud, Jessica, and since you've already admitted to accessing our accounts without authorization, it's going to be very easy to make the case that you're just as guilty as we are. You're lying. Try me, my father said. Drop the charges against your family, or we'll make sure you go down with us. Your choice." I hung up and immediately called Detective Rodriguez. "Detective, my father just threatened to file false charges against me if I don't drop the case against them." "Did you record the call?" "No, but jail calls are recorded." "Right, they are. Ms. Martinez, what your father just did is called witness intimidation, and it's a separate felony. He's making his situation much worse. Can he actually frame me for financial crimes I didn't commit?" "He can try," Detective Rodriguez said. "But we've already investigated your financial history as part of this case. We know that the transactions he's probably referencing were legitimate family loans and authorized purchases. If he files false charges against you, he'll just be adding perjury and filing false police reports to his list of crimes." The third call came that evening. "Jessica, I can't believe you're doing this to me," she said, and her voice was full of the kind of righteous indignation that only Sophia could muster when facing consequences for her actions. "I'm not doing anything to you, Sophia. You did this to yourself. I did this to myself. You're the one who called the police and had us arrested over a stupid misunderstanding. You tried to steal from me. I was borrowing money from you," Sophia corrected, "money that you owe me anyway." "I don't owe you anything." "Yes, you do," Sophia said, her voice rising. "Do you know how many opportunities I've lost because you were too selfish to help me when I needed it? Do you know what it's like to watch your older sister succeed while you struggle, and then have her refuse to share her success with family?" This was classic Sophia, turning herself into the victim, even while sitting in jail for crimes she'd committed against me. "Sophia, you were planning to drug me and steal thousands of dollars from my bank account. I was planning to take what should have been mine anyway," Sophia snapped. "You've been hoarding money for years while your own sister was drowning in debt. All I wanted was enough to get back on my feet. By stealing it from me without my knowledge or consent, by taking what you should have given me willingly if you actually cared about family and the other victims, the extended family members you and Mom and Dad stole from. Did you deserve their money too?" There was a pause. Then Sophie's voice got quieter, more calculating. Asterisk, asterisk. "Jessica, you don't understand what you've started. When this goes to trial, everything is going to come out. Every family secret, every embarrassing detail about our finances, every private family matter that you think should stay private. Is that really what you want?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that our lawyer is going to argue that this was all a family dispute, not a criminal matter. He's going to put your whole life under a microscope. Your relationships, your mental health, your history with our family. He's going to make you look like a vindictive daughter who turned against her family over money. Let him try. He's also going to argue that you've been financially abusing Mom and Dad for years by refusing to help them when they needed it. Elder abuse, Jessica, that's a serious crime. The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it wasn't so malicious. Sophia was trying to convince me that my refusal to give them money whenever they asked constituted elder abuse. Sophia, you're going to prison. All three of you are going to prison. Nothing you say is going to change that." "Maybe," Sophia said, "but we're going to make sure you suffer as much as possible while it happens. You think you're better than us, Jessica. You think you're the good daughter. We're going to show everyone who you really are. And who am I, Sophia? You're a selfish, vindictive bitch who destroyed her own family because she couldn't stand to see her sister succeed." I hung up. Those 3 phone calls told me everything I needed to know about my family's character. Even facing serious prison time, even caught red-handed with evidence of their crimes, even confronted with the testimony of multiple victims, they still believed that they were the wronged parties in this situation. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they'd been caught. They didn't feel guilty about betraying my trust. They felt entitled to my money and angry that I'd prevented them from taking it. They didn't see themselves as criminals. They saw themselves as victims of my selfishness and vindictiveness that night. I made a decision that I knew would separate me from my family forever. I called Detective Rodriguez and told him I wanted to cooperate fully with the prosecution. I wanted to testify at trial. I wanted to make sure that my family faced the maximum possible consequences for what they'd done to me and to the other victims. "Ms. Martinez, are you sure?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "Testifying against family members in open court is emotionally difficult. Your family's defense attorney is going to try to make you look bad, to make it seem like this was all a family dispute that got blown out of proportion. I'm sure," I said. "They had their chance to show remorse. to take responsibility, to acknowledge what they'd done wrong. Instead, they've spent the last 12 hours trying to manipulate and threaten me. I'm done protecting people who would rather destroy me than admit they made a mistake, okay? I'll let the prosecutor know that you're willing to be a key witness. Detective Rodriguez. Yes. How many other victims are planning to testify? So far, we have 6 additional victims who are willing to testify about crimes your family committed against them, and we're still investigating. There may be more. 6 other people whose lives had been damaged by my family's greed and manipulation. 6 other people who had trusted my parents and sister and been betrayed in return. I thought about those other victims, probably cousins, family friends, people who had welcomed my parents into their homes and been robbed for their kindness. I thought about how they must have felt when they discovered that people they loved and trusted had been systematically stealing from them, and I thought about how my family was probably making the same threatening phone calls to those victims, trying to intimidate them into staying silent about the crimes they'd suffered. That's when I realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting other people from my family's criminal behavior. This was about making sure that Sofia, Lina, and Carlos Martinez could never again use family relationships as cover for theft and manipulation. The trial was scheduled for March 2024. For the next 4 months, I lived with the knowledge that my testimony would probably send my parents and sister to prison for years. Some nights, I felt guilty about the consequences my family would face, but most nights, I felt relieved that I'd finally found the courage to stand up to people who had been exploiting me my entire life. What I didn't know was that the trial would reveal even more shocking details about my family's criminal activities, and that Sofia's final desperate attempt to avoid consequences would be so outrageous that it would make everything she'd done before look tame by comparison. The courtroom drama that was about to unfold would be more twisted than anything I could have imagined. And the moment when Sofia finally showed her true character in front of a judge and jury would be the most satisfying moment of my entire life. March 18, 2024. The Collin County Courthouse in McKinney, Texas. Walking into that courtroom for the first day of trial was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. For 4 months, I'd been living with the knowledge that my testimony would probably send my parents and sister to prison. But sitting there in the gallery, looking at the defense table where my family sat in orange jail uniforms, the reality of what we'd all become finally hit me. We weren't a family anymore. We were opposing sides in a criminal trial. My parents looked older, smaller than I remembered. 4 months in jail had aged them in ways that went beyond the obvious changes in their appearance. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and he'd lost weight that made his clothes hang loose on his frame. My mother's usual careful grooming had been replaced by the kind of institutional plainness that comes from having no control over your daily routine. But Sofia looked different in a way that was harder to define. She'd always been beautiful, always carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew she could charm her way out of any situation. Now she looked desperate, angry, like a cornered animal preparing to fight. The prosecution was being handled by Assistant District Attorney Michael Chen, a prosecutor with 15 years of experience in financial crimes, who had built his reputation on cases involving family fraud and elder abuse. He was methodical, thorough, and completely unimpressed by the defense's attempts to portray this as a family dispute rather than a criminal matter. The defense team consisted of 3 expensive lawyers that my family had somehow managed to hire. Despite being in jail for 4 months, I found out later that they'd taken out loans against my parents' house to pay for legal representation. Borrowing money, they didn't have to fight charges that carried prison sentences that would outlast their ability to repay any debt. Ada Chen's opening statement was devastating in its simplicity. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, standing in front of 12 ordinary people who would decide my family's fate, "this case is about trust. Trust between family members, trust between friends, trust between people who open their homes and their hearts to individuals they believe care about their well-being." He walked the jury through the evidence methodically: the notebook with victim profiles, the audio recording of my family planning to steal from me while I was unconscious, the bank records showing unauthorized transfers, the testimony from multiple victims who had been targeted by the same scheme. The defendants will try to convince you that this was a family matter, a misunderstanding, a series of loans and gifts that got blown out of proportion. Ada Chen continued. But the evidence will show you that this was a carefully planned criminal enterprise designed to exploit the trust and love that victims felt for the defendants. He paused, looking directly at the jury. The defendants used family gatherings as hunting grounds. They used cultural expectations about family loyalty as weapons. They turned the most basic human need, the need to belong, to be loved, to be part of a family, into a tool for theft and manipulation. When Ada Chen finished his opening statement, I felt like he'd perfectly captured not just what my family had done, but why it was so devastating. They hadn't just stolen money. They'd weaponized love itself. The defense's opening statement was exactly what I'd expected, a desperate attempt to reframe criminal behavior as family dysfunction. My clients are not criminals, said defense attorney Rebecca Walsh, a woman in her 50s who specialized in white-collar criminal defense. They are a family in crisis, a family that made mistakes in how they handled financial disagreements, but a family nonetheless. She painted Sophia as a struggling young woman, overwhelmed by debt. My parents as loving grandparents trying to help their daughter, and me as a vindictive older sister who had turned a private family matter into a public criminal case. Jessica Martinez had every opportunity to resolve this situation within the family, Walsh argued. Instead, she chose to involve law enforcement in what should have been handled as a civil matter. The question you need to ask yourselves is whether the actions of a family in crisis really constitute the kind of serious criminal behavior that deserves years in prison. I was scheduled to testify on the second day of trial. That morning, I sat in the witness waiting room, reviewing the timeline of events with Ada Chen, and trying to prepare myself for what I knew would be a brutal cross-examination. Ms. Martinez, Ada Chen said, the defense is going to try to make you look like someone who was looking for an excuse to hurt your family. They're going to bring up every time you refused to give them money, every family argument, every moment when you prioritized your own financial security over their requests for help. I understand. They're also going to try to argue that you somehow entrapped your family, that you set them up to commit these crimes so you could have them arrested. How could I have entrapped them? I had no idea what they were planning until Mark warned me. That's exactly what you need to communicate to the jury. The defense wants to make this about family dynamics and personality conflicts. We need to keep the focus on the specific criminal acts your family committed. When I was called to testify, I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. I'd never testified in a criminal trial before, and the weight of knowing that my words could send my parents and sister to prison for decades was almost overwhelming. But when I looked at the jury, 12 ordinary people who had volunteered their time to seek justice for victims of crime, I felt a sense of clarity that I hadn't expected. These people didn't know me or my family. They had no reason to care about our personal drama, or our cultural conflicts, or our complicated history. They were there to determine whether crimes had been committed, and whether the people who committed those crimes should be held accountable. Ada Chen walked me through my testimony systematically. The years of financial manipulation, Sophia's trading debts, and my refusal to enable her risky behavior. The dinner invitation that seemed like reconciliation but was actually a trap. Mark's warning, the discovery that my family had put something in my drink to make me unconscious. The audio recording of them attempting to steal from me while they thought I was passed out. Ms. Martinez, Ada Chen said, when you heard your family discussing plans to access your bank accounts without your permission, what went through your mind? I felt betrayed, I said, looking directly at the jury. Not just because they were trying to steal from me, but because they were doing it while pretending to care about my well-being. They covered me with a blanket and spoke about me like I was someone they loved, while simultaneously planning to rob me. Did you feel like you were in physical danger? Yes, they had given me something that made me unconscious against my will. I didn't know what it was, how much they'd given me, or what the side effects might be. For all I knew, they could have accidentally given me a dangerous overdose. The direct examination took 2 hours. Ada Chen methodically established the timeline of events, the evidence of premeditation, and the impact that my family's crimes had had on me and other victims. But I knew the real test would come during cross-examination, when the defense tried to tear apart my credibility and paint me as the real villain in this story. Defense attorney Rebecca Walsh approached the witness stand with the kind of confident aggression that I'd expected. She'd been paid a lot of money to keep my family out of prison, and she was going to earn every dollar. Ms. Martinez, she began, You've testified that you love your family, but isn't it true that you've been refusing to help them financially for months before this incident? I refused to give my sister $12,000 to cover her trading debts. Yes. And isn't it true that you knew your family was in serious financial trouble but chose to prioritize your own financial security over helping them? I prioritized not enabling Sophia's risky financial behavior. Yes. So when your family found themselves in a desperate situation, and you refused to help them, they had to find other ways to solve their problems. Ada Chen objected before I could answer. Your Honor, the defense is asking the witness to justify the defendant's criminal behavior. Sustained. Judge Patricia Williams said. The jury will disregard the question. But Walsh wasn't done. Ms. Martinez, isn't it convenient that you happened to set up a recording on your phone before going to dinner with your family? I didn't set up the recording because I expected them to try to rob me, I said. I set it up because I work in technology, and I've learned to document important conversations in case there are disputes later about what was said. So you went to what was supposed to be a reconciliation dinner with your family, but you were already planning to record them without their knowledge. I was planning to protect myself from further manipulation, yes. And when you received a text message from your sister's boyfriend warning you about some supposed plan, you chose to believe him over your own family. I chose to investigate whether the warning was accurate, yes, by pretending to be unconscious and trying to catch your family in some kind of trap. By protecting myself from what turned out to be an actual crime in progress. Walsh kept pushing, trying to make me look paranoid, vindictive, calculating, but every question she asked just reinforced the central facts of the case. My family had put something in my drink without my knowledge. They had attempted to use my fingerprint to access my accounts without my permission, and they had planned to steal money that belonged to me. After 3 hours of cross-examination, I stepped down from the witness stand, feeling drained but confident that I'd told the truth clearly and convincingly. Over the next week, Ada Chen presented testimony from 6 additional victims who had been targeted by my family's scheme. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Family gatherings where they'd felt unusually tired, unauthorized access attempts to their accounts, small amounts of money or valuable items that had gone missing after family visits. Senora and Rosagut, my father's 72-year-old aunt, testified that she'd discovered unauthorized charges on her credit card after my parents had house sat for her while she visited relatives in Mexico. The charges were for expensive electronics that had been delivered to my parents' address. My cousin David Martinez testified that cash had gone missing from his bedroom during Sophia's birthday party, and that he'd later seen Sophia wearing jewelry that looked suspiciously similar to pieces that had disappeared from his girlfriend's purse. Family friend Maria Santos testified that she'd woken up after a family barbecue to find that someone had accessed her phone and transferred money from her savings account to an account she didn't recognize. Each victim told a similar story. They'd trusted my family, they'd welcomed them into their homes, and they'd been robbed for their kindness. But the most damaging testimony came from Mark, Sophia's ex-boyfriend, who had witnessed my family planning their crimes and had finally decided he couldn't stay silent. I heard Sophia, Elena, and Carlos discussing plans to drug Jessica and steal from her bank accounts. Mark testified. Sophia said it would be easy because Jessica always trusted family and wouldn't suspect anything. Elena said they just needed to make sure Jessica was unconscious long enough to access her accounts. Carlos said they should take enough money to solve Sophia's debt problems, but not so much that Jessica would notice immediately. Did you try to talk them out of this plan? Ada Chen asked. Yes, Mark said. I told Sophia that what they were planning was wrong, that it was criminal, that it would destroy their relationship with Jessica permanently. Sophia said that Jessica owed her the money anyway, and that taking it without permission was just collecting what was already theirs. What made you decide to warn Jessica? I realized that I couldn't be with someone who would drug and rob their own sister, Mark said. And I couldn't live with myself if I let it happen when I could have prevented it. When the prosecution rested its case, I felt confident that the evidence was overwhelming. My family had been caught red-handed. Their crimes had been documented in audio recordings and physical evidence, and multiple victims had testified about similar patterns of behavior. But Sophia's defense attorney had one final card to play, and it was more outrageous than anything I could have imagined. On the 8th day of trial, Sophia took the witness stand in her own defense. What happened next would be talked about in legal circles for years to come. and would convince everyone in that courtroom, including her own parents, that Sofia Martinez was capable of depths of manipulation and cruelty that defied belief. Her testimony would reveal that everything we thought we knew about her was just the tip of the iceberg. And her final desperate lie would be so shocking, so calculated, so completely evil that even I, someone who had lived with her manipulation for 26 years, would be speechless at her audacity. The moment Sofia opened her mouth to testify, she sealed her own fate and destroyed any remaining sympathy I might have felt for the family that had betrayed me. What she said from that witness stand would haunt me for the rest of my life, but it would also set me free. March 26, 2024, Day 8 of the trial that would determine my family's fate. When Sofia Martinez was called to testify in her own defense, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. For 8 days, we'd heard evidence of her crimes, testimony from her victims, and audio recordings of her planning to drug and rob her own sister. Now, finally, Sofia would have the chance to explain herself. I expected her to show remorse. I expected her to take responsibility for her actions. I expected her to beg for forgiveness and hope for leniency. I was wrong about all of it. Sofia walked to the witness stand wearing the orange jail uniform that had been her daily attire for the past 4 months, but somehow she managed to project an air of confidence that seemed completely disconnected from her circumstances. She was facing decades in prison, but she carried herself like someone who was about to reveal information that would change everything. Ms. Martinez, her defense attorney Rebecca Walsh, began, "Please tell the jury in your own words what really happened on the night of November 19, 2023. Sofia looked directly at the jury, her expression earnest and vulnerable in a way that reminded me of all the times she'd manipulated our parents into believing her lies. "I want to start by saying that I love my sister Jessica," Sofia said, her voice soft and emotional. "Everything that happened that night happened because I was trying to protect her from something terrible. Protect me." Even facing decades in prison, Sofia was still trying to make herself the hero of this story. "What were you trying to protect Jessica from?" Walsh asked. "From the truth about her mental health problems," Sofia said, and I felt my blood turn to ice. "Can you elaborate on that?" Sofia took a deep breath, like someone preparing to reveal a painful family secret. "Jessica has been struggling with severe mental illness for years," she said. "Paranoid delusions, violent outbursts, threats to hurt herself and others. My parents and I have been trying to get her help, but she refuses to admit she has a problem." The courtroom was completely silent. I stared at Sofia in disbelief, unable to process what I was hearing. "The dinner on November 19th was supposed to be an intervention," Sofia continued. "We invited Jessica over, hoping we could convince her to get voluntary treatment. But when she started having another paranoid episode, talking about people trying to poison her and steal from her, we realized we needed to take more drastic action." "What kind of drastic action?" "We gave her a mild sedative, just something to calm her down so we could get her to the hospital for evaluation. Everything else that happened was Jessica's delusion. The recording she made, the claims about us trying to steal from her, none of that was real. It was all part of her paranoid fantasy." Couldn't breathe. Sofia was telling the jury that I was mentally ill, that the crimes I'd witnessed and recorded were hallucinations, that my entire testimony had been the product of a diseased mind. "Ms. Martinez," Walsh continued, "if your sister was having a mental health crisis, why didn't you call emergency services?" "Because we were afraid," Sofia said, and now there were tears in her eyes. "Jessica had threatened to hurt herself if we ever tried to have her committed. She said she would rather die than go to a mental hospital. We thought if we could just calm her down and talk to her rationally, we could convince her to get help voluntarily." And the other alleged victims who testified in this trial. "Jessica has been contacting our relatives and family friends for months, convincing them that they've been victimized by crimes that never happened. She's very persuasive when she's having an episode. People believe her because they love her, and they want to help her." Sofia was claiming that not only were my accusations false, but that I had somehow convinced 6 other people to falsely accuse our family of crimes that had never occurred. She was portraying me as so mentally ill that I had created an elaborate conspiracy of lies involving multiple family members and friends. "Ms. Martinez, do you have any evidence of your sister's mental health issues?" "Yes," Sofia said, and Walsh approached the witness stand with a folder full of documents. "We have medical records, incident reports, documentation of Jessica's erratic behavior going back several years. Ada Chen immediately objected. Your Honor, the defense has not provided any of this alleged evidence during discovery. We've had no opportunity to examine or authenticate these documents. Judge Williams sustained the objection, but the damage was done. Sophia had planted the idea in the jury's mind that there was medical evidence supporting her claims about my mental health. Ms. Martinez, Walsh continued, what would you like to say to your sister? Sophia turned to look directly at me, her expression full of what looked like genuine love and concern. Jessica, I know you're sick and you can't help the things you believe right now, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. But I need you to know that we love you and we want to help you get better. Everything we did was because we care about you and we're worried about you. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Sophia had taken every piece of evidence against her and reframed it as proof of my mental illness. The audio recording, delusions, the other victims, people I'd manipulated while having psychotic episodes, the physical evidence, either fabricated or misinterpreted by someone who wasn't in touch with reality. But Sophia had made one crucial mistake in her elaborate lie. She had underestimated Ada Chen's preparation and the thoroughness of the police investigation. When Ada Chen stood up for cross-examination, he was holding a thick folder of documents that I hadn't seen before. Ms. Martinez, he began, his voice calm and professional. You've testified that your sister Jessica suffers from severe mental illness. Do you have any medical training that qualifies you to make that diagnosis? No. But are you a licensed psychiatrist? No. Are you a licensed psychologist? No. Are you a licensed social worker or mental health counselor? No. But I know my sister Ms. Martinez. You testified that you have medical records documenting your sister's mental health issues. Can you tell the jury which doctors created these records? Sophia hesitated. I, our family doctor, and some specialists. What are the names of these doctors? I don't remember all the names, Ms. Martinez. I'm holding Jessica Martinez's complete medical records from every healthcare provider she's used in the past 10 years. Ada Chen held up the folder. These records show routine annual physicals, treatment for a broken arm in 2019, and a few visits for minor illnesses. There is no documentation anywhere of mental health treatment, psychiatric evaluation, or any of the conditions you've described. Sophia's face went pale. Those records might not be complete. I'm also holding employment records from Jessica's current and previous employers, Ada Chen continued. She has never taken mental health leave, never been disciplined for erratic behavior, never had any workplace incidents that would suggest mental illness. Her performance reviews consistently describe her as reliable, professional, and emotionally stable. People can hide mental illness. Ms. Martinez, you testified that the other victims in this case were convinced by Jessica to make false accusations. Are you saying that your 72-year-old great-aunt Rosa Gutierrez is lying about unauthorized charges appearing on her credit card? She might be confused. The credit card charges in question were for electronics that were delivered to your parents' address. We have delivery confirmations with your father's signature. Are you saying your great-aunt somehow arranged for stolen electronics to be delivered to your family's house? Sophia was trapped, and she knew it. Miss Martinez, we also have security camera footage from the electronics store where the fraudulent purchases were made. The footage shows your mother using Rosa Gutierrez's credit card. Are you saying this video evidence is also part of your sister's elaborate delusion? I don't know about that, Ms. Martinez. Let me ask you directly. Did you or did you not conspire with your parents to put a sedative in your sister's drink on November 19, 2023? Sophia looked around the courtroom desperately, like she was searching for an escape route that didn't exist. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right, she said finally. Ms. Martinez, you've already testified. You can't invoke the Fifth Amendment. Now, to avoid answering questions about your previous testimony, Judge Williams intervened. The witness will answer the question. Sophia sat in silence for nearly a minute, the entire courtroom waiting for her response. Finally, she spoke. Yes, she said quietly. We put something in Jessica's drink. And did you plan to use her fingerprint to access her bank accounts while she was unconscious? Another long pause. Yes. And did you create profiles of other family members and friends whom you planned to victimize using similar methods? Yes. So your testimony about Jessica's mental illness was completely false. Sophia looked at me with an expression of pure hatred that revealed her true character more clearly than anything she'd said during her testimony. Yes, she said, it was all lies. The courtroom erupted. Several jury members looked visibly shocked. My parents, who had been watching their daughter's testimony with growing horror, now understood that Sophia had been willing to destroy my reputation and credibility to save herself. But Sophia wasn't done. As Ada Chen walked back to the prosecutor's table, Sophia suddenly stood up in the witness box and pointed directly at me. "You want to know the truth," she screamed. "The truth is that you deserved everything we did to you. You've been acting like you're better than us for years. You have money, and we don't, and you refused to share it. We're family. You owed us that money." "Ms. Martinez, please sit down," Judge Williams said firmly. "No," Sophia shouted. "I'm not going to prison because my selfish sister couldn't help her own family. Everything we took from you and everyone else, we deserved. You people have money, and we needed it. That's not stealing. That's justice." "Bailiff," Judge Williams said, and two court officers moved toward the witness stand. "You ruined our lives," Sophia screamed at me as the bailiffs restrained her. "I hope you're happy. I hope destroying your own family was worth it." As Sophia was removed from the courtroom, still screaming accusations and threats, I sat in stunned silence. In the span of 30 minutes, she had revealed herself to be capable of depths of manipulation and cruelty that I'd never imagined. Even after everything I'd experienced, she had been willing to claim that I was mentally ill to avoid responsibility for her crimes. She had been willing to destroy my reputation and credibility to save herself, and when that plan failed, she had revealed her true belief that she and my parents had been entitled to steal from me and others because they needed money, and we had it. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants. 6 weeks later, I sat in the same courtroom for sentencing. Sophia received 25 years in federal prison, the maximum sentence allowed under the guidelines. Her courtroom outburst had eliminated any possibility of leniency. My father received 18 years, my mother received 15 years. All 3 would be eligible for parole after serving at least 85% of their sentences, meaning that Sophia would be 48 years old when she was released. My father would be 76 and my mother would be 70. Judge Williams delivered the sentences with the kind of measured gravity that made clear she understood the significance of what had happened. The defendants in this case violated one of the most fundamental bonds in human society, the bond of trust between family members, she said. They used love as a weapon, cultural expectations as tools of manipulation, and family gatherings as opportunities for criminal activity. The court has considered the defendants' lack of criminal history, their expressions of remorse, and the impact that these sentences will have on their family relationships. However, the court has also considered the vulnerability of the victims, the sophisticated nature of the criminal enterprise, and the defendants' continued attempts to manipulate and intimidate victims even after their arrest. The sentences imposed today reflect the seriousness of these crimes and the need to protect the community from individuals who have demonstrated a willingness to exploit the trust of people who love them. As I watched my family being led away in handcuffs to begin their prison sentences, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that justice had been served, sadness for the relationships that had been destroyed forever, and gratitude that I had finally found the courage to stand up to people who had been exploiting me my entire life. But mostly, I felt free from the obligation to fund other people's mistakes, free from the guilt of saying no to unreasonable requests, free from the fear that setting boundaries would result in being cut off from family love. It's been 8 months since the trial ended, 8 months since I've spoken to any member of my extended family, most of whom blamed me for destroying the family rather than holding my parents and sister accountable for their crimes. I've moved to a new city, started a new job, made new friends who know me for who I am rather than what I can provide financially. I'm in therapy, working through years of conditioning that taught me to equate love with financial sacrifice. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about people and situations. The voice in my head that warned me something was wrong during that dinner, the voice that told me my family's behavior wasn't normal or acceptable, that voice was right all along. Last month, I received a letter from Sophia. It was sent from the Federal Women's Correctional Facility in Fort Worth, where she's serving her sentence. The letter was 5 pages of the same manipulation and blame-shifting that had characterized every interaction I'd had with her for 26 years, wrote that she'd found God in prison and realized that forgiveness was important. She wrote that family was the most important thing in life and that our disagreements shouldn't separate us forever. She wrote that she was sorry for the misunderstanding that had led to her conviction and hoped I could find it in my heart to visit her. She wrote everything except the 2 words that might have mattered. I'm sorry. Sorry for drugging me. Sorry for trying to steal from me. Sorry for lying about my mental health in court. Sorry for years of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. She wasn't sorry for any of that. She was sorry she'd been caught. I folded the letter, put it in my fireplace, and watched it burn, because I finally understood something that had taken me 26 years to learn. Some people don't deserve forgiveness, no matter how much DNA you share with them. Some relationships are so toxic that the only way to save yourself is to burn them down completely. And some families are so broken that the healthiest thing you can do is build a new life with people who see you as more than just a source of money. I don't miss my family. I miss the family I thought I had, the family I'd imagined they could become if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, loved enough. But that family never existed. It was a fantasy I'd created to avoid facing the truth about people who saw me as useful rather than valuable. Now I have something better than the family I was born into. I have friends who support me without expecting payment. I have colleagues who respect my boundaries. I have a therapist who helps me understand that my worth isn't measured by my willingness to be exploited. And I have the knowledge that when someone I loved tried to destroy me, I was strong enough to fight back and win. Asterisk. So let me ask you something. Do you have people in your life who only contact you when they need something? Family members who make you feel guilty for having boundaries? People who treat your success as their entitlement? If so, you're not alone. Financial abuse within families is more common than most people realize. And it often goes unaddressed because we're taught that family loyalty means accepting any behavior from relatives, no matter how harmful. But here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone your financial security just because you share DNA with them. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind just because they raised you. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they claim to love you. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. If my story resonates with you, if you see patterns in your own family relationships that remind you of what I experienced, please know that it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to choose your own well-being over family expectations. And it's okay to walk away from people who would rather destroy you than take responsibility for their own choices. What do you think? Was I right to press charges against my own family, or should I have tried to handle this privately? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own safety? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories help other people realize they're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. If this story helped you recognize patterns in your own life, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is let people know that they're not crazy for feeling like something is wrong. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about family betrayal, toxic relationships, and finding the courage to choose yourself when the people who are supposed to love you try to destroy you instead. Because everyone deserves a family that builds them up instead of tearing them down. And if you weren't born into that kind of family, it's never too late to create one for yourself. Thanks for listening to my story. Stay strong, set boundaries, and remember, you are worth more than what you can provide for other people. Asterisk.